this. So this is our final panel of the day, and I would like to introduce Nicholas King, Associate Professor in the Department of Equity, Ethics, and Policy in the Biomedical Ethics Unit here at McGill, and he will introduce our panelists. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Great to see everyone here. Welcome to the panel on AI and healthcare. We have three distinguished guests who I will introduce in sequence. So our first guest is Professor Samar Faraj, who holds the Canada Research Chair in Technology, Innovation, and Organizing at McGill. He's been researching issues of coordination and organizing in healthcare for 25 years in both the US and Canada, building on results from an ongoing study of how Montreal hospitals are deploying AI in support of operating room scheduling. He'll address the ethical issues that are emerging around the use of AI algorithms in complex medical decision-making and coordination. Take it away, Summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Lindsay and Nick, and especially David, for making this a possibility. And the team who has helped organize it, the wonderful people who helped us make it here. My research and thus my remarks are going to be based on the question of how do we approach AI in terms of trying to deploy it to help support our long-suffering healthcare system. And what is the promise and what is the reality and where can we go from here? Today, AI is I teach a course on emerging technologies, and one of the frameworks I lead with is the hype cycle. And if you are familiar with the hype cycle and you looked at it, you looked up AI or generative AI or any of those topics in that, within that framework, we're at the peak of the hype. So beware and don't believe everything you hear. So what is the reality of AI in healthcare? We know a lot about societal bias that gets inscribed in the AI and gets reflected to us back when we run the AI. Laurette this morning mentioned a report that she shared with me about how bias against people of color got ingrained in an AI, and everybody is in shock that the AI is racist, but it's really a reflection of the data that was fed into that AI, and as a result, it's just reflecting our societal reality. And many of you have been privy to those debates about whether AI will the automation thesis of AI, it will replace, half the jobs or a certain percentage of the jobs out there. Or you may like the rosier picture of we will all get a very intelligent algorithmic assistant that will do the things we need help with. But the way I approach this is not through these two lenses, but more at looking at how AI is impacting the work and lives of healthcare professionals, how AI is entangled in the processes and the work practices in hospitals and other healthcare settings. It is a current topic for the class I teach. For example, the term project that was given to us by one of the largest hospitals in Montreal was the following question. We have implemented or tried over 100 AI projects, pilot projects. What do we do now? Which ones should we run with? Which ones should we implement? Which ones should we make them part of our operation, and how? So this is where we're at. It's not the novelty is wearing off and people are suddenly facing the difficult choices. So in this talk, I want to explore 3 points. One is how we think of AI, and I'm going to put forward the thesis that AI is not just an artifact, and we have to not think of it as a thing out there, but more something different. I want to talk about how AI exposes rules and how rules are interpreted and used in practice. This is from my studies in the healthcare sector. And then third, while AI is great at developing better predictions and solutions, it also creates new challenges and offers dilemmas for us in terms of organizing. So let me start by saying that AI is not just an artifact that is separate from the social context in which it's developed or implemented. The way AI takes shape in an organizational context typically is a set of choices that are made by choosing a vendor, choosing a version of the technology, who is in the room when the development is happening, which groups, and then also which professions are overrepresented or underrepresented in that room and in those conversations. So it's important that, and add to it the fact that we don't understand very well the technology. It's black box for most of us. And so it even leads to, one of those situations, what could go wrong here? So to illustrate this point, I'll share with you a study I have, or I'm currently doing in the introduction of an AI algorithm to help scheduling OR surgeries in local hospitals. You know it's a major issue. You know that people wait over a year to get their surgeries in place. And there are a complicated set of rules, priorities. A cancer patient should have priority over maybe a hip replacement, but there's also how long people have waited. So it's a fairly complex set of issues and dynamics that have to be dealt with. And there are cancellations, there are priorities, reprioritization, there are emergencies. The trauma, function of, for example, the Montreal General has people arriving suddenly and you have to put them in the OR. So that changes the dynamic. So what we find that the way AI is developed or brought into an organization, that it does not take into account those issues of the human and relational aspect of the work. We find that you feed the AI last year's data in terms of models and data and histories, and it spits out on the other side a schedule. But that does not take into account, for example, the programming clerks who have an important role. Those of you who have been in surgery would know that a programming clerk is the person that contacts you on behalf of the doctor. The mighty surgeon does not talk to you. They will only see you, if you're lucky, at the moment where they put you under. So the programming clerk is the one who talks to you. And when they talk to you, they take new information about you. You may have had a spouse who had just had an accident. There may be reasons you would want to postpone or change your surgery, and they try to manage that. So you can see that effectively AI exposes that we have rules and social dynamics that allow us to schedule and optimize, but those rules do not capture the complexity of the setting or the situations. And there is hidden or not so visible rule breaking that are there for reasons of compassion or reasons of medical necessity that cannot be found in the data of the year before, right? So to account for these dimensions, and the AI will provide a hard solution that is very difficult to deviate from. And if you deviate for some reason, it becomes the data of next year's AI will rely on your data, and this deviation that could have been accidental or temporary or occasioned by a specific patient becomes part of the data set. So you can see the issue. So this brings me to my last point, which is AI gives better predictions and optimization, but it creates new challenges and dilemma. So there are undesirable consequences. The wrong lessons are learned. Just like with the bias examples, where you see how the AI got the data in a way that is very straightforward and thus open to kind of the wrong predictions, we will have situations like this with AI in healthcare. And again, not that someone is to blame, it's just that it's very mechanistic, and it's the way we feed it the data and the prediction it generates. So it raises a lot of questions. What data matters? So if you process the hospital data, you are missing out on the wide expertise of those clerks, the programming clerks that talk to patients and get specific issues and relations information in there. And compassionate rule breaking is a key aspect of the medical practice. It's not what they lead with, but it's an important thing. Physicians know that sometimes those rules are not fully applicable. And then how do we ensure that the AI doesn't learn the wrong lessons from this data set that is colored by specific situations and human needs? And my last point is that the broader issue that we need to address, if AI hard codes certain data into rules and processes, what happens to the human expertise, ethics, and judgment? And these are the issues that I think we should address here. And thank you for giving me the time to finish this.
Thank you very much, Samer. Our next speaker will be Azadeh Dasmalki, who is the CEO and co-founder of Vital Tracer, a medical startup that designs smart wearable medical devices. She's a PhD candidate at Ottawa University, obtaining her master's degree from the same university in biomedical engineering. In the last 12 years, her main field of research has been designing and developing medical devices, particularly vital signs monitoring ones, and applying AI to biosignals.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me today. So I'm gonna see this topic as another perspective, which is my own experience as a startup perspective. So what we have is it's one device similar to this, attached to the skin, having optical sensors and ECG, and it's measure different vital signs and then transfer it with the Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to the smartphone, and then with the Wi-Fi to the online platform. So it has different AI algorithms to convert those biosignals to vital signs. And one of those examples is blood pressure. So we don't use a cuff to measure blood pressure, and oxygen saturation, which is instead of using the index medical device, it uses optical sensor on chest. And the reality that using AI in healthcare, it's in different perspective that I can say that in generally, lots of other startups or big companies that they are doing, whether it's more for online platforms, like for hospital to make a schedule an appointment, or it's more in imaging side, like for X-ray and ultrasound or others that they use usually computer vision. So there is not a specific any medical device in a market to use AI and get the clearance yet. So as one perspective, if we want to talk about it, even with the Health Canada and FDA, it's not 100% clear that if they want to in the reality implement AI, what's the rule and regulations? Yes, they have a couple of guidance recently. They are working on it, update it all the time, but it's not as other medical device standard that we used to have it for the last decade, I can say. So for more than 100 years, we are using a blood pressure cuff device. It's inflate and deflate and measure blood pressure. And for SpO2, the same, and it's a mechanical or optical sensor, have a calibration, calculate one fixed algorithms, and voila, give you the number. And how they test these devices, of course, they are testing on a couple of humans based on different rules and regulations and standard. For example, for pulse oximeter, they use on something around 15 subjects to 35 subjects only to get the clearance. And in the standard, it mentioned that 2 people with a dark skin color, or 15% of those populations. So it means that if you are testing on 15 subjects, it means only 2 dark skin color. And guess what? Who's gonna define what is dark skin color and what's the shade of the skin color? And in COVID, in the last panel, it was very obvious that they talk about diversity and how the Black people is more in a bias, unfairness for the AI, but in the COVID time specifically, different studies shows that big disaster that in a medical devices that they use it in hospital can get 20% overestimation when the people, darker skin color, goes to the hospital. They are in a very bad situation, they measure it, and because it's not calibrated well for them, it shows that they are okay, and then send them back home. That's why the largest population that was lost from COVID was Hispanic and African American, because of this huge mistake from human. It wasn't AI at all. It's a medical device. Why? Because for medical device, they have a clinical trial. For them, there are a couple of people sit down and write those standards. I'm not sure that whether they are the combination of engineering and medical doctors, or it's just a one sector. And then they choose some particular human factors which is not diverse and big number at all. And it's usually, it say that you are testing on a healthy subject in lab. So it's not a real patient, and you are manipulating them to have a different scenarios. So it's like a simulation. So you test on a real healthy subject that is mostly, and unfortunately, it shows that it's white males. So it's not testing lots of in a term of diversity on females, and then not on a dark skin colors. And then if you are a female dark skin colors, I don't have a good news for you, unfortunately. But on the other hand, we try to stand up in 2022 and ask for help that, okay, we want to build an accurate and precise oxygen pulse oximeter that is working for all human skin colors. So we are not going to test on 50 white male only. So let's say that we wanted 20 subjects, equally male and female, and then we went to the dermatologist to define skin color. So even for dermatologists, they have a different skin color categories, and we choose one. And then we ask for dark skin color, you can have 3 categories. And we ask for volunteers to pay them, participant, to get. But you know what? Because more than a century, we used to, not we, like those dark skin colors has a less economy, income, and system used to abuse them or not fair with them, let's say this way. So they have a fear to participate. We couldn't find anyone except a very close friends to ask them as a healthy subject to test. So we approach all the cultural centers who have a different background of colored, skin colored, so it's not only, let's say, not African American only, but not only Hispanic, but we have Indian people, has a lots of range of skin color or dark skin colors, and everyone that we know in our networks and in different accelerators and incubators on our LinkedIn and all the networks. And the most hardest things that we find, convince them people to come to test and show up. So now I'm not going to complain that much that it's like a people who, like, we need to do a movement to give that trust back and like give a peace of mind to those people that, look, if we want to have AI fairness, we need your help. And we are here to help you. But unfortunately, I'm a not dark skin color, so it's very more hard for me to convince my dark skin color community to trust me, which is makes sense. But the good point that I'm a visible minority, as you can see, so they can trust easily and better. So I try to only, so I know we have a limited time, so I'm gonna go with the summary of using AI in a medical device, the regulatory path is unclear. There are a couple of platforms that using AI got recently clearance. As a medical device, it's not there yet at all. So it's very, very vague, and there is no standard. Go back to the pulse oximeter, although that they say that, okay, using 15 subjects or 35 subjects, this is when you use an optical sensor and a linear algebra formula. Then if you want to get the precise calibration for each skin colors, you need to use AI, although that it's not deep learning, but it's kind of learning needs to do. And then we go back to them and said, for this training data, how many people do we need? So this is not a question that we can ask only on a one specific, let's say, major. So it's not only computer science, but we need medical doctors, dermatologists, different engineers to be gathered together to make a decision. And it's hard to do that. So I hope that FDA is working on this specific particular application, but I hope that they come sooner with addressing this issue and then go to the other devices, because we don't want to see more disaster coming, whether it's pandemic or not, but on minority people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our third speaker is Justin Mallett. Justin holds a PhD in cellular and molecular biology and an MBA in pharmaceutical management from Laval University. He began his career working in economic development for the life sciences industry in Quebec, where he participated in the onset of several foundational initiatives for this sector, such as Montreal In Vivo's early clinical research initiative, the FRQS's Oncopole, and Quebec International's life science cluster initiative, Quebec Vitae. Justin today leverages his experience and position in the policy and healthcare shaping team to elaborate ways to harness the strong potential of data science applications in the Canadian healthcare ecosystem, using data from health records to real-world evidence to enable artificial intelligence and digital health. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you so much, Nick, for the intro. I feel I've attended the entire day and feel like, starting with the disclaimer, I am a lobbyist. But to your surprise, a lot of the things I've heard today are the messages that I am relaying to the government. We've talked about value-based healthcare, moving to definition of healthcare more based on value and less on cost. How health systems are independable. Also, how can we achieve interoperability with our different health data systems. Clinical trial design and how much this needs to evolve with the time. So we can have conversation about lobbyism, but I'm not here to sell anything to anyone. So I am a biologist by training who has embraced the challenge of a data-driven healthcare, and believe me, there are a bunch in Canada that we need to address. I am not a computational specialist by any means, so I will not go into too deep into examples, but when we were asked to come up with remarks, 4 topics came to mind, so welcome to my TED Talk. So right now, we are scratching the surface of the enormous potential of AI in healthcare. As was previously said, there is a very big hype right now. AI has traversed many winters, and I'm happy to say that at Roche we've been keeping our ears to the rail and looking at all of the potentials of AI for some time. So we are in a position where we can talk a little bit well about the applicability, because internally we do have data scientists, we do have some AI, some ML projects that are being worked on internally or in collaboration, especially in Canada. We are partners of Mila and Vector. So this is a sector that we truly believe will be the next frontier for healthcare and dramatically accelerate and transform how we do research and development for new therapies. How does this translate to a pharma company? We like to think ourselves as a health solution company and not just specifically for small molecules. So we do use AI to enhance internal efficiencies. So how can we make ourselves better? Meaning using NLP's chatbot to do some literature screening, some translation. We are dealing with some very highly private data. Not everyone, some people are. So using LLMs or public models is to be done with extreme precaution. So we're of course, developing our own solutions internally. But the most, what comes to people's mind when I'm talking about using AI as a pharma is in drug development. So we are partnering with many companies externally. Recursion might be a name that you recall, in accelerating this process of drug development through using AI. AI can help us go leaps and bounds in the timing of drug target identification. Roche, I work for the pharma division, but we also have a diagnostic division, meaning medical devices. And in those devices, of course, a lot of ML goes into some computer vision, some decision support, and any ML that needs to go through in a high throughput machine. Again, that's why it is closed. Let's not go too deep into the examples. I'm actually not part of that division. But generally speaking, AI gets us really excited for our internal use, but also about around how much it can help the system work better. And for a company like us, we will thrive if the healthcare systems thrive also. So addressing healthcare crisis, we've talked about it already yesterday. People want to access physicians. So there's obviously low-hanging fruits that can be automated in helping this crisis. Technology will also enable a more personalized healthcare or personalized experience. Providers are tasked with giving care. They've been tasked in the recent years to also collect data, and it's time for them to now reap the benefits of all of this data that they have collected, and be able to rehumanize care through this technology. And one other very exciting aspect is the multimodal. How will we be able to converge the different technologies to build an even greater understanding of disease and everything? So, first topic, congratulations, we've moved through the first one. General concerns around that the private sectors is talking about. It's race to regulation, of course, with all of the internal conversation around C27 or ADA in Canada, the executive order in US, and the EU Data Act or AI Act. Sorry, we're hoping that all of the countries are talking to each other, so everyone is moving in the same direction and in a direction that will not inhibit innovation but promote it. There are, of course, a lot of risks that should not be taken lightly, but should also not necessarily stop us from moving forward and innovating. Data ethics at Roche has been central for quite some time. we, as a company, do work with tremendous amounts of data from clinical trials, from work also with local registries in Canada, but elsewhere. So there's a lot of data flow that goes through a company like us. So data ethics has been something top of mind for very long. So recently, we have published a peer-reviewed journal article called The Evolution of Data Ethics in Clinical Research and Drug Development. From this has followed 13 data ethics principles that we truly believe and support at Roche that I will not go through, but they're publicly available. Final topic, I've merged two. Final topic I wanted to brush up on was biases. We've heard about them quite a lot today. I tend to think that we should not strive for zero biases, and that's a personal thing. So remove my Roche hat for a second. But making sure that we understand what are their sources and how to manage them before just turning a blind eye and trying to say we do not introduce bias. We do at different degrees, and those biases have a lot of impact. So we need to, I think, acknowledge them, and that's also a topic that we have been working a lot on. Having products that are in the personalized healthcare, it's very hard. It's not very hard. It is a topic of discussion because we are targeting some subpopulation for treatment and development. So there is a fine balance of how we do those things. And finally, a few points I wanted to maybe finish on. Keeping human in the loop, that's one of our answers to all of these ethical questions, trying to augment care and not replace humans. And finally, patients own their data, and they should be part of every discussions around it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, every single one of the panelists came in under time, which is a first for me in many long years of being in academia, so thank you very much. Which means we have a lot of time for open discussion. Questions from the floor. I believe we have the two microphones, so can do that. While we're waiting, I'll take the moderator's privilege of seating one question. So one of the things that strikes me about this space, so I'm old enough to have gone through several hype cycles for different things, the Human Genome Project, genetics, personalized medicine, and they do seem to follow a narrative. One thing that seems different, and maybe I'm wrong about this, is that the AI hype cycle is taking place in the context of almost complete dominance of platform capitalism, of these very, very large companies for whom our traditional regulatory structures, that just doesn't seem to touch them. They have access to huge amounts of training data, and no one, it seems like no one is really in the position to be able to audit what they're doing, demand transparency, regulate, and sort of the cat's out of the bag. And I just wonder what your reflections are on this rather cynical take on the landscape that we're in right now.
Indeed, I think it's a worthy question to reflect on collectively, because how we got here is indicative. So we live in an era where the top 7 out of 10 most valued companies on the stock market are technology companies, and they go by the name of GAFAMs for their first letter of their names, and you know all about them. And suddenly we have woken up and said, is this a good thing? And one of the reasons we ended up here is people did not want to stifle innovation. You know, there's an innovation bias in our universities and in society, and then this is potential of AI, but before it was search, it was Web 2.0 or Web 1, whatever it may have been, Amazon delivering books to your doorstep 25 years ago. All these things, people did not want to stifle them, and they received undue advantage, phenomenal advantages. So if some of you have gray hair, so you may remember that when Amazon first started delivering packages and books to your doorsteps, you did not pay taxes if you lived in the US. And that was a huge competitive advantage, because if you went to your local bookstores, you paid taxes. And this led to this philosophy of kind of move fast and break things. And you have seen it with Uber and some of these companies. And now we are suddenly faced with how do we regulate all this? And some people say it's too late to regulate because of the power of these platforms, and they have become platforms and they have become closed ecosystems. When I teach, I call them walled gardens, and you know the model. Those of you who have an Apple device who wants to talk to some Android device, and they don't play well together. So. I think though there's an awareness that maybe regulation has to be, big business needs to meet big regulation in a sense of at the level of the kind of society, and there is hope that there's increased awareness of this need as we are moving forward, and I'm hopeful about that, but so far it hasn't been pretty.
I think this time is different. Yeah. And I think it's because AI is not one thing. Yeah. AI is an umbrella of things. So technologies can do one thing. Self-driving cars can drive it themselves. Blockchain can create a ledger. But AI is a family of technologies that can do anything. And so if we look at the history, or the short history of how we use the term AI has been used for different things that we think resemble something that only humans could do, and now machines can do. Back in the day, it was robotics. Then it became machine learning. Now we're starting to use it mostly for generative AI and methods that are slightly different from just classical regressions in machine learning. And that means that AI has seeped already into our economic and social structure in ways that we've only seen the internet do in the very early 90s when it became widespread, and the steam engine do before. It changes not one thing, not something that self-drives or how we create ledgers, but simply almost every aspect of how we build our economic and social lives. So I think it is different in the sense that we will have to think of to what extent the frameworks that we have to think about each of these relationships apply in the new technological context, and in which extent we need to adjust others.
Might just add that the healthcare sector, I think, is moving more precautiously because we are a highly regulated environment. We live in this highly regulated environment. So we know, we have been in those conversations, and we know it cannot happen in a non-regulated way. So I think I often, at like Chamber of Commerce conversation or conversation with other sectors, try to make a point that these conversations have happened in other sectors with other technologies. Let's learn from them. Surely, you're right. Big technology, big regulation. They're not doable. We just have to take the elephant one bite at a time. Is that it?
Yeah. So I totally agree with you that AI might be widely everywhere in every technology, but in healthcare, we already stuck with lots of tough regulations. So the only concern that I have, like, even with the regulatory in healthcare, they don't know what's better to put in terms of regulations for the AI for healthcare, because AI in healthcare, it's still something new and fresh, and people are trying to experiment. And if, like for prediction, it needs more time to get the results. So it's something very fresh, and the only concern that I have, if they want to write regulations for AI and make it tough, which is good, but at the end, who are the people who's writing those regulations? And we want to make sure that the diversity in education and academy background, so it shouldn't be only computer science people, and it shouldn't be only one specific gender or race, so we need really diversity in every aspect of AI in health sector for regulations.
Or even worse, not just policy people writing the policy.
Oh yeah, and insurance people for sure.
But you're touching a good point where one probably of the first bites of that elephant is literacy. Yeah. Data and AI literacy for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. Opening it to the floor, I saw a number of hands raised.
I go ahead? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, the question is for the AI law expert. Okay. You mentioned that you can go from anonymous data and trace it back to individualized data. How can you do that?
Well, I'm not a computer scientist, so I cannot tell you. Yeah, so I cannot do that, thank you. Yeah, to be fair. Other people can do that. So mostly you make inferences from group tables, and that partly depends on whether you're merely using de-identification, which is removing identifiers from the data, or you have more sophisticated techniques such as differential privacy. So imagine, for example, that I collect everyone's data now, and I put it in an Excel sheet, and I collect your social insurance number, your name, your telephone number, your address, and how you like your coffee in the morning, if you drink coffee, and if not, whatever other beverage you like. And then I say, okay, I will delete everyone's names. Technically, that's de-identified data, because it doesn't have your identifiers anymore. Let's say that, okay, we count social insurance numbers as identifiers. Let's say that I remove those two. Okay, now we have properly de-identified data. I can still infer who each of you are, and that is actually me, just from your phone numbers and some intense Googling. And while that's a silly example, that applies to other forms of databases and other forms of de-identified data. And the more granular that your data is, the easier that it is to re-identify. Computer scientists have shown that you can re-identify anything that has location data with just 3 location points in one day. Mostly because 2 of those will tend to be your job and your home. But even if they aren't, they're pretty good at re-identifying that. And when you use differential privacy, which is a bit better, then there are mathematically sophisticated models that I cannot explain to you right now that allow you to do a similar process for that too.
I would jump in another hat. I work in epidemiology, and one of the biggest powers of big data is linking different data sets. And if you link several different anonymized data sets, it becomes very, very easy to individually identify people. If I have your health data, but it doesn't have your name on it, but it has your address, and I have another database that has your address and your name, but no other data. I mean, that's not how it actually works. That's an oversimplification. But the more powerful our uses of big data, the more likely it is that we will be able to re-identify.
I was just going to add a quick sociocultural example to your questions and what the panel addressed. But we do this in healthcare all the time, where we say we're de-identifying data on people, and we remove their name and their date of birth and their gender. But one of the things we actually do is leave postal codes. That's all we leave. And just the postal code can identify, because in certain rural areas, one house is that postal code. So then you actually know who you're talking about and whose data you're now looking at. So that's just another cautionary tale of mine.
There's one in the middle over there.
Hi, thank you very, very much for this day. My question really has to do specifically with the individual patient. So, a couple questions on that. If the data that you're providing, let's say in a research study, cannot be guaranteed to remain anonymous, given everything that you've described, does the researcher then have an obligation to tell you that before you sign that consent form? So that's one question. The other one has to do with treatment. So if AI is used, or if you're being asked to be involved in assessing a product, this is an AI product, right? What type of questions should patients be asking of their physician? Because clearly you're providing, information. And the last one has to do what we just heard now about postal codes, et cetera, is can a researcher ever really tell you and guarantee you that your data remain anonymous? From what I'm hearing, it's not possible. So far, somebody's asking me tomorrow to participate in a research study, and it always says that it's going to be anonymous, kept for 10, 20 years or something. What are the implications here?
We're all turning to you.
Sorry for so many, but it all has to do really with patient consent and privacy.
We might. No, but I think maybe so you talk about de-identification, maybe talk about anonymization? So there are different levels of how we can treat data so it doesn't trace back to people. We talked about de-identification, which is the first step, or the easiest one. And in anonymization, it goes a little deeper, where it's more data are removed, and you need two sets. Correct me if I'm wrong. You need two sets of data to retrace a person. So there are de-identification is one strategy. There are others that are better, and that will allow you anonymity.
Give an example, please.
The U.S. Census.
Oh.
So the U.S. Census, for example, uses differential privacy, which is the gold standard for anonymization. But I still think the answer is no, because it depends on what you mean by anonymity. When we say information is anonymous, we mean it satisfied industry and policy standards to be considered anonymous, but any information could be re-identified with enough effort. Now, our job is to make sure that that enough effort is not possible, that other people don't get access to it, that we put so much weight into the anonymization process that the computational power required to re-identify it would be unfeasible, because no one would spend that amount of time and money to re-identify this particular data. It probably depends on a risk model of how risky we believe the data is and how valuable it is for other people if they can actually re-identify it. So I think in terms of the consent forms that we already use, one could put something like, this information will be anonymized according to best practices, and we commit not to re-identify it, and we commit to keeping it safe. But I do think that we need to try to spend less effort in figuring out how to design the consent forms, because the way that we phrase it won't change much for the person who doesn't know the technicalities of the implication, and more on trying to keep the data safe when we have it.
So I want to say that if you're looking for perfect anonymity, maybe that train has left the station, and if somebody puts in enough effort and algorithms and data together, they may be able to trace you. But I think you have to look at the societal level for more protection, in a sense that if you were in the United States, and let's say you have genetic information data that points to a possibility of some sort of rare disease, insurance companies would spend a lot of effort to try to identify people like you or a person like that, because it makes a difference in terms of cost of treatment. But in Canada, where everybody has access to the healthcare system, irrespective of their condition, and no one can be barred from it, your protection is that it doesn't matter, and no one is going to even spend the time and effort to identify you, unless it's some researcher like people here.
Are you pointing me?
Yeah, so that's your protection, I would say, at the societal level.
That's a good point.
Exactly, and I want to mention exactly complimentary of this part. By the way, you make my life hell for today.
I'm so
So
sorry.
you're pushing people to not participating in a clinical trial anymore.
No, I think people should.
I already have a tough...
Researchers keep your data way safer than most of the companies you give it to, so do participate in clinical trials.
Thank you.
Whoa.
Not yours, other companies.
Yeah.
Except Roche. But when you want to participate in any clinical trial, you can do a couple of things. Like the first reason why you want to participate it. So you can think about the worst case scenario that might be happened. But like assume that when you go to participate, yes, they are gonna read a consent form and they're gonna do their best to not leak any identifications, but let's think about a worst case scenario. So it's really depend on the clinical trial that you are doing. So I will give an example. Whether you're doing a genetic test on clinical trial with a rare disease, or you are testing one ECG cardiac device on your chest, and that's it. So it's like the risk analysis that any patient can do it by their own, that whether it's going to be dangerous or not. And the second thing is a very good point, Dr. Sommer mentioned that in here it's not a big concern about insurance because all the people here equally have access to healthcare. And that shouldn't be that much concern that if those not important data of the health goes outside. And the third thing that you need to keep in mind that whether you like it or not, as long as you have a smartphone, any device at your home with you, you are sharing every single information in your life with them, whether you like it or you give them a permission or not. So then rethink again, whether you share your health information is gonna help people to save life for later, or it's gonna give opportunities to insurances to make other patients' life miserable.
I think we had someone in the third table back in the middle there asking a question. Yeah, you. You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, well, the title of the conference is about... Oh, thank you. Hello. The title of the conference is about ethics and AI. And so we're talking about data, and of course data is a big component of what we're concerned with regard to AI. And I believe that ethics could be helping at the forefront of collecting data. But I would like to hear from your own experience and knowledge, where do you feel that ethics is at in terms of helping to ensure that the utilization of AI in healthcare is eventually going to be perceived as safe?
I can go first. For my perspective of what I'm doing, like implementing AI for a monitor device, as a CEO of the company, I'm suffer from all ethics, which is really unnecessary for lots of things. So yes, it's important to have lots of rules and regulations, but think again, what kind of the maximum risk that leaking those data could happen. The reason that I'm saying that all the regulations that we have in healthcare is a lot. Canada is the most, Quebec is the worst, like the hardest regulation that you can think about it. And then accessing to the hospital data even if they de-identify it and make it anonymous, it's impossible. And then sharing the data with the other companies that they want to do some proof of concept to save lives, impossible. And my personal perspective is as a person who tried to save lives and need the data, and those data is not going to go to the insurances, or whether if it goes, it's not gonna, nothing's going to be happening. I'm suffering from it a lot.
Yeah, so a great question. If you were, I don't know, buying a toaster or buying a microwave or buying any device, a bike, there would be expectations of how the device would perform, and there would be a warranty, and there would be, if you got injured in using that device, or you will be able to sue. We don't have that in the AI space right now at the societal level. It's like the Wild West. People come up with some ideas, they throw it out there, and we discover after the fact that it's biased and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, at least on some populations or groups. So this is a temporary, hopefully this is a temporary state of affairs, and AI will be regulated like any other product or any other software that is put out by any developer. So that is important to remember and to help push through, especially when all the key figures in the AI industry are calling for such regulations and calling for ending this unusual state of affairs. Now, on the medical side, as someone who just went through human subject approval to do a study in one of the Montreal hospitals, I can tell you that the ethics are getting tighter and tighter, and the level of training now, I remember I just did it last month, must have been 8 hours of training I went through, and I have no interest in the subjects. I don't have an interest in the patients. I only look at how people work together. No interest in patients. I don't, give them anything, stuff like that. But that's, in spite of my complaining about that, it's actually a good thing, which means the ethical standards are going up and are getting tighter, and to ensure protection of data and privacy. So there is progress happening. It may be a bit slow right now.
Just adding a small point, the data sets we are working with is very different than yours. So that's why the conversation around data ethics has started a long time ago at Roche. So this is my opportunity to tell you the 13 principles. No. But this has led to boosting the conversation around AI ethics in our company faster, because that conversation has had already started. So although we're not there and we don't have answers yet, we're actively partaking in that conversation internally, externally with our academic partners, also with some responsible AI institutes, to make sure that what will be our AI ethic principles will be up to par. And another sidebar on regulation, we are waiting for regulation. Although that not all industry players will tell you the same thing, rules make it easier to play a game. In this ecosystem where we don't have rules right now, and it is the Far West, for a company that wants to make things the right way, it's very hard to move forward confidently. That's why we're pushing for that conversation around regulation very hard, because as soon as we have those guidelines, guardrails, then we'll be able to play in that field and bring you innovation safely.
I think I don't have much to add to that. I think those are very good points. I would just point out in addition that every researcher that I know that works with human subjects tells me that the process is a nightmare. And every computer scientist that I know that works on keeping data safer tells me that the risks are boundless. And those two things can be true at the same time. And that's partly because we use the same rules for everything, and as you were explaining, sometimes the risk models are very different. So I think it is good that we think about ethics, and it would be even better if we try to think about ethics less in terms of checklists that may be appropriate for some data use or some data collections and not for others, and more as principles that can be realized in different ways depending on the different uses. Because that would give people that are trying to do good things with data and keeping it safe more flexibility about what to do with it and less red tape around it, while maybe even improving our safety standards.
If I can jump in again, since for better and worse, I have ethicist in my job description. I'm a big proponent for two things, which is training. I do a lot of work teaching ethics to medical students, and healthcare professionals have a great deal of ethics training. The people who are engineering and designing the technology tend not to have much ethics training. The second thing I'm a big proponent of is what I say is, many research and development decisions that are thought of as technical are actually ethical decisions, right? The pulse oximetry example, someone somewhere years ago, it never occurred to them to test pulse oximeters on anything but people with white skin. Same is true of things that measure pulmonary function. You've probably heard of the Balin sentencing algorithms. What people thought of as just technical decisions that were very narrow had immense weight regarding ethics and equity. And I think if we can train people to recognize the equity considerations in these things, it's not a panacea, but our narrow framework of thinking, ethics is regulation and it's IRB forms. And the bottleneck comes when researchers have to apply and you have to solve every problem, privacy, transparency, informed consent in your IRB form, and then you have to do 8 hours. If we integrated things a little better, I think it would relieve the pressure on that bottleneck. Next question. I think we had one over here.
Sorry, this is probably the second seminar in AI and healthcare I've been attending this week, and as interesting as it seems, we're talking about ethics, but we're never talking about those theories, theoretical philosophies and approaches, and we just go to the data, at the heart of data, because and I'm trying to explore this, to understand this, does that mean all those philosophers, ethicists that put forward those rights theories, utilitarian theories, and like 50 philosophers that talk about them, those kind of a school of ethics are irrelevant to AI? That, for example, in seminars, they try not to involve them, as they say that, for example, we follow this kind of approach, and therefore this is our mechanism to ensure that we remain ethical in our behavior. And the second thing is that, for example, in a conventional drug, for example, approval, well, you work with different samples, you go to FDA, you show your sample, these are the results, and they say that, okay, we approve this drug. When we're talking about machine learning algorithms, every time the new data is, entered into the algorithm, everything changes. New things happen as a result of the new data. Therefore, we are having an evolving situation. So if we don't have a broader ethical approach and philosophy, how do we decide what is our margin of error that is ethical, that we can say, okay, we approve this algorithm, go to market, based on this approach, this is the margin of error, you're good to go. Even if you harm the society, but at least we have this moral ground to defend those damages to the society. But unfortunately, or maybe I'm wrong by looking at it that way, but in no, like when I was at Centre Hospitalier Université de Montréal, all the doctors and data scientists are talking about, for example, yes, the algorithm made a mistake here with the cancer, or the algorithms is better than the doctors in detecting the cancer. But the discussion of ethical theories and philosophies and approaches at a higher level is absolutely missing in this discussion. And I'm wondering, do we need a new kind of ethics for AI, or should we bring those discussions back to the table? Thank you.
I don't think it is relevant what you're saying in how they created this panel. We are not ethicists, so my guess would be that's why the conversation went there. I only have a small answer to a small thing you said about algorithms that keep learning. Right now, through the FDA, it's not possible to sell. An algorithm does have to stop learning when it goes through accreditation and it sells out. Whenever you want to pull out a new version of you have to go through the entire process again. And I'm sorry, that's just a small part of your entire point, which is absolutely valid, but I would leave the ethicist to answer this.
So I'm not an ethicist, and I don't pretend to be, but I am not scared of the fact that our old ways to look at ethics need to evolve and change, given that everything in the world keeps evolving and changing. And with AI, there's an impetus to update and change and make it more relevant. And I trust my colleagues at the two ends there to be part of this movement, and I will be very glad for it, because we need it. The issue that is the ethical issue for me is, or the one that I'm more able to wrap my head around, is the issue of responsibility. If your algorithm shows bias or mistreats people or doesn't give them the right treatment or kills somebody, often the developers will say, it's not me, it's the data or it's the algorithm, I don't know what the algorithm is doing, it's a black box, it's learning on its own, all these things you have heard. And that is not a great state of affairs, and we need someone who's responsible. Otherwise, people will keep putting out there these products that are not well tested, and we don't know how well they work. And so you put something out there for any sector to use, you have to stand by it. And then suddenly you'll see these corporations or these developers spend a lot more time testing and changing their algorithms so they are safer.
I think principles are important. And the reason is that the tension between rules and principles depends on how we can reduce risk. Rules are great when we know very specific ways that we can reduce risk. We say that cars need to have lights, they need to have mirrors, they need to respect the stoplights, because we know that those things limit the risk. When we don't know what very specific rules limit risk is when we need to go back to principles. And because it's very difficult to predict risks in AI, I think principles have an increased importance compared to other technologies that we could be more specific when we regulate them.
So I have to confess that I did not know that there is a theory and philosophy things for ethics. To be honest with you, I was always an engineering student and working on healthcare. So it's like all the ethics goes to IRB forms that we used to work with it, and FDA and Health Canada. So I apologize for that part. So I'm not expert, or it's like this is the first time, and I'm really curious to know that if there is any like a reference book to read about theory and philosophy in ethics in healthcare, because the rest is going to be really broad for me. But how I usually, when I want to implement anything or build anything, I usually see in different perspectives. So I can talk about a specific, what I'm doing. I'm trying to see that for the ethical perspective as a patient, myself, as a caregiver. So if I use that one for my mother, my parents, or on my child. And then as a different stakeholders, so it's like as a healthcare provider ethic perspective, like a nurse, medical doctors, pediatricians, and then as a government perspective. So I don't have that sense of taste on government that much, but I can think about their budget, financial budget. But these are the 3-4 aspects that I usually think whatever I want to do in terms of ethics. Different perspectives, so I'm trying to put myself in a different hats to see it.
I'd like to know what the person that has ethics in his job title thinks about that.
I have a lot to say about this, but
4 minutes.
I think, yeah, thank you. Gangs, please hold me to time. I think the big place for ethical theories is to help us continue to remind ourselves that technology is not inevitable, that we tend to come up with technological solutions to things and they take on an aura of inevitability. AI in particular, as the panelists have already said, what's it good? It's good at optimizing for something. And we give it a task to optimize for, and I could call that utilitarian, but I won't. What I think ethical principles or philosophies do is they say, what if we ask different questions? Like instead of optimizing for something like profit or efficiency, we tried to make things more equitable. And you don't need to read John Rawls to have the idea that we can ask different questions of the technologies that we use to solve problems. And I'm definitely I like to read, widely in philosophy. I don't think you need to do that. I think actually, as I just made the point, it helps to broaden your mind. And so I think there's always going to be room for that. I believe, are out of time. So I am going to thank do we have one more question?
No. I'm preparing the next.
Okay. So I just wanted to thank our panel once again for their wonderful presentations and answers. And I'd love to grab you. Yeah, yes, definitely. I absolutely want to. Thank you.
Okay. So thanks for inviting me to deliver the closing remarks, and also thanks for staying here so late. I'm Daniel Ding. I'm Associate Professor of the Desautels Faculty of Management. My research interest lies in health data analytics and health system management. So as we conclude for the insight of the day at this conference, I would like to now summarize the valuable discussions from the 3 distinguished panels, which I really personally learned a lot. And I want to also share my experience related to each of these topics. So our first panel is talking about ethics and innovation in healthcare, if you still remember, offered a profound exploration into the complexities of integrating new operations and technologies, right, subject to ethical constraints. So both Alan and Nagin, they mentioned that the challenge is to demonstrate the new practice will create value. I fully agree with that, but I want to add that it's more maybe equally important to demonstrate that the new practice has controllable risk or minimal risk, right? And this part sometimes becomes more of a concern by the leadership. According to my own experience, the leadership may be fine if your staff doesn't create value. But if your staff creates risks or patient safety or ethical debates, then they will soon quickly kill your project, pilot. Using my own experience, I once in an ED in the West Coast, that's my collaborating ED, I proposed to let the physicians and the nurses in the emergency department to wear a wristband. So this is like a sensor which could monitor their trajectory in the ED, and sometimes they could also collect the vital signs, maybe like a pulse, so we could know whether they work under pressure, right? So that could allow us to collect the data to some time motion study, and it is like that. But the challenge we face is the ethical part that some physicians and nurses said, oh, I don't want to be monitored, right? You would know where I am. Especially there's a privacy issue that I go to a restroom, you know how long I spend in the restroom, right? Which makes me super uncomfortable. Okay, so the project cannot be pushed off. Oh, then what to do? The question is, I think Alan also mentioned that the solution is not straightforward. Well, I give you an example how this problem is actually solved, but not by me. We cannot push out this pilot in the end, but someone from Dana-Farber Cancer Center, the Harvard Medical School, right, they implemented similar ideas, but with some very small difference from our proposal. So instead, they also have a sensor equipped by the doctors, right? The difference is their sensor is based on room rather than based on people. So once you enter the room will know the person is in the room, the physician or nurse in the room. But once you exit the room, the sensor becomes inactivated. So it will not monitor whether you go to restroom or what you're doing that. Right? So that is somehow, which is not a perfect solution because we lose the data outside the room, but still, at least it's implementable. Right? So that is, I think, one lesson that I learned from that ethics presents a challenge to us. But how to solve it presents the challenges to the innovations. But how to solve it, we need to be more innovative. Right. So that also, I think the rest of the panel, Lawrence mentioned one interesting idea. He said innovation is not just technology, you remember, right? He said innovation is operations, yeah, which I really like his idea because I think Lawrence and we have been working on creating new operations for the hospital management. Right? I would also add to his comment that innovation also includes new concepts, right? New methodology, like Lorette proposed, right? The convergence and the design, those approach to better understand the complicated health systems. Okay, indeed, I have been working with the emergency department, right? And usually the innovation comes up with the main idea is from operations, but if the technology could help, it kicks in, right? So one example we did is for the emergency department, when the patients come to do the triage, we could let the triage nurse to order like a CT or radiology test. Usually the patient have to first see the triage nurse, then see the doctor before the order could be placed. The doctor will place the order, right? So now we changed that. Maybe for some patients, it's very clear, the patients need a CT. So even at the triage part, the triage nurse can order the CT test. The benefit is you reduce the patient's waiting time. Right? Otherwise, when the patient wait like 3 hours or maybe 4 hours to see the doctor, then maybe wait another 4 hours to see the CT. Right? So but then we need some technology that will help us. So when the triage nurse is doing that, we can design an AI algorithm, right, to help. I wouldn't really call it AI, but like somehow some algorithm to recommend that this patient may need a CT. Okay. So that will be the first panel. For the second panel, I think we are talking about promoting inclusion and equity in healthcare. So the focus shifted to addressing disparities in healthcare access. This is a challenge intensified during the COVID-19, especially because now the medical resource become really competitive and scarce. Okay, and I didn't work on COVID closely, but I worked on a very similar topic about allocating scarce resource. That's deceased donor kidney allocation. So I have been attending a conference, a meeting with the decision makers in the United States. One thing I think in considering of equity, inclusion, those ethical constraints is I think I'm telling them we still need objective. We need to first define what your equity really means, right? What inclusion really means, and I believe there is a definition. Right? We should not avoid those. I know it's difficult, but don't avoid that. Let's just face that. Let's define it clearly and propose clear measurements. Well, my proposal get some pushback because people said, oh, it's too difficult to define them, right? But I said, if you don't define those objectives, those measurable objectives, without them, then you are debating, oh, this policy A is better than this policy B. I said, that's not a science. That's more like a politics, right? So I think the big difference is science, really want you tell me what is the definition of equity. What's the definition of, and how you measure them, right? What's the measurement? Yes, there could be debate, but we need the first step is to find ways to nail down what is the measurement. There could be different objectives. Sometimes they are conflicting with each other. That's fine, but let's just find a procedure to determine them, right? That could be, you could vote them, you could by voting or by like a committee, right? But that I think is one thing in the related to promoting, like optimizing outcome with the many different constraints, is we need to still go back to the scientific foundation of the problem, right? First define those concepts, which could be controversial, but we still need to define them clearly. So our third panel on the ethical management is a very excited topic about AI in healthcare, and brought to the, so that I think Sama mentioned that scheduling, how you use AI, you do the data-driven optimization to schedule patients, right? That's a very interesting topic, and also I have been working in that for a long time. One thing I do want to mention that related to ethics is your AI algorithm sometimes only focus on the social optimal, which means you improve the overall efficiency, but maybe it sacrifices the patient's autonomy. So it may be not good for the individual, but better for the society. And so that we have to be more mindful in doing this scheduling, which Sam also mentioned. Right? So I give you one example. I'm working on a very interesting example. When you a person go to a physical check or maybe health check, right? Let's consider you need a blood test, then you need the ultrasound test. And there are many people there. Actually, I was doing that in a China hospital. There are many people, okay? So I'm asking, let's say the ultrasound always takes longer. So the queue before the ultrasound takes much longer than the queue for the blood test, right? The blood test is faster, okay? So then the issue is, if you want to really make everything go, minimize like all the people's waiting time, the strategy is you want to route most of people to the shorter queue first. You let the people first do the blood test, then do the ultrasound, right? So that will be the algorithm they initially implemented in this center. However, we find what? It's not, for the patients, it's not optimal to follow the AI's suggestion. So once the AI patient arrives, the AI will tell the patient, right, which station you should go. You should go to room 5 for the blood test, then go to room 6 for the ultrasound. However, the patient, if some smart patient find out, actually that's not optimal for me. You think about it, if there's a longer queue, is a slow queue, a fast queue, you should first go to the slower queue, because then you secure a position earlier at the queue, right? So because after the slower queue you finished, for the faster queue, it then just take some extra time, which is not a big amount, right? You think about it. You will first need to secure your position in the slower queue. So that's the AI decision or recommendation actually violates what you should do as a patient himself. So, okay, so what's the innovation part we're doing? We said, yes, that's not aligned, that's not bad. So what we're doing is we recommend the patient to go to the shorter queue first, but at the same time, we virtually let the patient queue for the longer queue. So the patient doesn't have to be physically there in the longer queue, but their ranking was recorded based on their arrival time, who come to the hospital earlier. Okay. And I also want to talk about, I think Azadel, Justin, and Ignacio, they all mentioned that the risk of AI, using AI algorithm in the medical diagnosis, for example, right? I think they bring up a very interesting point that something which looks good may not work for an individual or maybe a marginalized minority group. Right? And actually, this, I think, is a very big problem in currently the use of AI. That's called distribution bias. Because the data you are using training your algorithm actually may have a different distribution as the real data you use. Right? Though this is, I think, people have been aware of this topic, but they are not such a great solution to this topic. So I think the problem we have is that it's not the problem of using AI, but the problem of using a not that intelligent AI, right? And also, what makes it worse, we may not have a good method to test whether an AI algorithm is really how much intelligent it is. So back to your question, you said, can I get error bound, error margin for the AI? That itself is difficult. You have to test the AI unbiasedly. That's difficult because unless you put this AI for real use, right? If you use training data, then again, the distribution is biased. Okay? So that actually creates a very controversial problem. Should we use the AI now? If we use the AI, it's very good for the development of AI, but it sacrifices our generation. Maybe some of people will suffer from the potential risk of the AI, right? So that's, I think, a difficult, controversial ethical problem in the end. Sorry, maybe I'm going over the time. So thank you very much for your active participation. And in the end, let's have Professor Lindsay Holmgren, the director of the Laidley Center, to give a final remark. Thank you.
Well, I know everybody's had a long day, so I'm going to keep it very short. And I'm just going to say, I've been really inspired by everything that I've heard today. Days like today have that dual effect of raising many more questions, but also giving one a sense of sort of a collective mission or sense of direction. And we're all thinking about the ethical implications of our work, and that's brought us here today. I also want to announce that very quickly that the Laidley Center is a part of a lot of these concerns in various ways. As we speak right now, we are hosting, or we're supporting 4 students, undergraduate students, who are at an invitation-only Ted Rogers Cup ethics case competition, which we hope that we know they will acquit themselves magnificently. And as a representative of the Laidley Center, I have volunteered and will be working with someone else, most likely from McGill University, to help with AI education and considering the ethical implications of AI education across McGill. I will say as well that I actually sat on the working group that wrote the policy recommendations for the use of AI, the ethical use of AI at McGill University. And to Ignacio's point, we decided to lean into principles. That is really what we're trying to do. And the Laidley Center is very concerned with recognizing the principles by which we can try to make very difficult decisions that don't conform very well to rules. I'm delighted that we're working on that. And to Richard's point, also the Laidley Center, a person who couldn't be here today, Brian Rubino, and 2 graduate students, one of whom is here, Julian Plummo. We are working on a code of ethics for the Faculty of Management, which we currently don't have. So we are thinking along the lines of the principles by which we can conduct ourselves and comport ourselves ethically in this world. Now, final announcement. We have here with us, for those of you who weren't here this morning, we have David Laidley, our generous benefactor of the Laidley Center, and we have Lester J. Fernandez, who has just given us $4 million for a chair in business ethics that will exist under the Laidley Center, the auspices of the Laidley Center. So we'd like to celebrate at the end of the night with Lester. I invite all of you to, we don't have necessarily glasses now, but we'll raise a glass in David and especially today in Lester's honor for helping to make this possible and continuing to grow what the Laidley Center is capable of doing. So thank you for the chair in business ethics, Lester J. Fernandez. Okay, so I'm very encouraged. We're all here presently, physically, mentally, because we care about these issues. And let's go talk together for a little while over a mocktail or a glass of wine and something to eat. Thank you very much for being here.